What are you?
Just a man who knows what he sees.
The $6 million man, as though it cost him everything. It is now worth $15 million. Became the biggest star on TV after breaking bones, crashing automobiles, and jumping off buildings. His body was disintegrating behind the scenes, and his heart almost died. And Farrah Fawcett, his wife, left him in 2003 for his best buddy, and the doctors had to drain every week. Fluid comes out of his knees, yet at 86, he's doing something that no one else is doing. As anticipated, Major continues to film stunts when other actors his age have retired. You would be surprised to see him in a brand new science fiction film. Lee Major was born into sorrow. His father passed away in 1939 before he could breathe. 5 months prior to his birth, his mother abandoned him during a steel plant accident. While working as a nurse during the most difficult post-Depression years in America, Lee attempted to raise him alone, but one was only 17 months old when a drunk motorist struck and murdered her. Way to work after being adopted by his uncle and aunt as a newborn, he was taken. Lee was unaware of all of this for years after moving to Kentucky, believing his original parents were adoptive parents. But one day when he was a teenager, he was prodding on a rainy afternoon. He discovered old newspaper articles regarding the passing of his true parents in their attic. That moment altered everything. Instead of spiraling, he promised himself vowed that his adoptive parents would never regret taking him in. His preoccupation with success at Middlesbrough was fueled by promise. He put all of his heart into sports in high school, becoming a local hero as a result. Gifted in football, and the school named their field after him years later. College scouts were drawn to his speed and drive, and in 1957 he landed Indiana University on a football scholarship. But just 2 years later, when things went south, he got into a heated argument with a fraternity and was expelled because he lost everything, including his scholarship and future, and he continued to play collegiate football. Although he transferred to Eastern Kentucky University to give it another go, but in his first game, a catastrophe struck. For 2 weeks, he was paralyzed from the waist down due to a back injury, which physicians feared. Despite his darkest fears, Lee managed to resume walking and eventually running. He ultimately recovered completely, but his football career was permanently ended by the NFL scouts who had previously viewed him as when a developing star had to leave football. He began performing in minor plays at a Danville theater as a new actor. As he completed his degree, in 1962, he held a diploma and he had to decide between teaching and pursuing a goal, and he went with the latter. He relocated to Los Angeles, where he found a work as a park recreationist to help make ends meet. His life took a drastic shift when he became a director in North Hollywood. He saw Dick Clayton, a well-known agent who had previously worked for James Dean Clayton. He enrolled in acting classes because of something in him, and within a year, Lee was in his. The first movie was only a brief flashback, but it was the beginning of everything occurring. His private life was subtly disintegrating. He had married young, and had Lee Jr. in 1962, but the strain of moving to a new place prevented. His wife eventually left him because the money and unknown future became too much for him. Returned their son to Kentucky, which devastated him, but he persuaded himself that was better that way because at least his son was with family. But he never forgot the anguish. Seeing his son depart from the airport, too young to realize he might not be returning at this time, Harvey Lee Yerry made the decision that if he was going to turn into, he needed a name that fit someone in Hollywood, so he maintained Lee and deleted Harvey. Subsequently added Majors to honor Johnny Majors, his favorite football player, but it was a means of clinging to the one thing that had previously defined him, not merely about sounding like a celebrity. Acting before destiny intervened once more, and he ran upon Rock Hudson, who had already visited Kentucky and recalled the young man who had the appearance of a movie star. Hudson preserved his word and secured Lee an agent named Dick, who helped him establish himself in Hollywood. Clayton, who formerly tutored James Dean, organized acting classes, study period at NGM, and even gave him more self-assurance before he left. Most people were unaware at the time that he was in Hollywood with his wife and child, but Majors even had a chance when he landed because of Hudson's silent assistance. Heath Barclay's role in the Big Valley began to move quickly. When the admirers and celebrity arrived, the ego initially followed, which was unfortunate. Veteran Hollywood icon Barbara Stanwyck attempted to help him, but Major, not always acting with grace, yet raw and a bit too confident, specifically caused actual harm when he insulted a set extra without realizing she was the renowned Smothers Brothers Stanwyck's sister, Sherry Smothers, left. Quietly, she confronted him in front of everyone, reminding him that being famous wasn't only by standing up for someone, she was preserving the industry's professionalism and respect. Desired that their dispute escalate into disputes over billing respect, and Major was eventually compelled to issue an apology. But by then, something had already broken. Like Hudson, Stanwyck had been eager to mentor him, but he had lost that chance. At about the same time, Major received a significant offer that led to he was scheduled to portray Joe Buck, a lost soul in New York City, as Midnight Cowboy. His entire life might have changed if he had survived, but the large valley was revitalized, and suddenly the John Voight was given the post when the opportunity disappeared, and he ultimately ended up with. And it's odd to consider how one may receive an Oscar nomination and a spot in movie history. A single contract choice or schedule conflict might completely change a career. Who knows how different his legacy might be if Majors had taken that role. He starred in the groundbreaking film The Ballad of Andy Crocker in 1969. There was more than simply acting in this television film about a Vietnam soldier returning to a society that had moved on without him. Unadulterated passion, his character returned home to discover betrayal, loss, and nowhere to belong among an unexpected cast that includes Jimmy Dean and Marvin Gaye. Major told a daring story that went deeper than anything fans had previously seen. To reveal in 1969, when the conflict was still ongoing, but it demonstrated his versatility and his promise that went beyond simply being attractive on television. As the years passed, unexpectedly, the fire cooled between Major and Stanwyck. As time went on, the tension eventually changed to thankfulness. Stanwyck had been stern with him because she had noticed something in him early on. While some actors maintained cordial relationships with her throughout the Big Valley, Major ultimately referred to her as his own, but he had to earn it the hard way. Mentor, even his closest buddy, it was a discreet acknowledgement that he had matured, and that when Lee Major entered the room, he finally grasped what she was attempting to tell him. In 1970, The Universe of Virginia was more than simply a role. It was a novel beginning for a dying program. The series was renamed The Men from Shiloh. With a daring new look that was largely influenced by spaghetti westerns, Major's portrayal of Roy Tate was a perfect fit for this grim new vision. Sets, clothes, and even the theme music, which was newly composed, were all altered. With the renowned Ennio Morricone, viewers paid attention to ratings soared, and a show that had been losing ground was suddenly back in the top 20. But the 9th season was its final one, even though things were getting better. The show's chic remake was a victim of the network's notorious rural purge maneuver that immediately removed numerous primetime shows with a country theme. Major wasn't abandoned. He immediately began watching another serial, Owen Marshall Counselor. Majors portrayed Jess Brandon, the younger partner in the courtroom drama at law. The network brought Arthur Hill's more seasoned lawyer in the hopes that his celebrity would draw viewers, particularly considering that his name has previously increased viewership. But for Major, courtrooms and neckties weren't exactly his ideal role. He jokingly quipped that he missed anything moving in the outdoors. That the show had its moments, but the only exercise he had was moving back and forth in a courtroom soundstage. Prominent guests, including a young Mark Hamill, John Travolta, and Martin Sheen appeared, and the program ultimately played a significant part in his. Majors also set up Farrah Fawcett, who would eventually become his wife, to make an appearance on a few episodes. But the offer that might have altered the $6 million man's life when the concept first occurred to him, and he nearly declined in 1973. The project's original title was Cyborg, and the script made the idea of a superhuman man performing acrobatics every 5 minutes seem too corny. He didn't want to be a part of that kind of show, even because minutes reminded him too much of the campy Batman series from the 1960s. He was uneasy after agreeing to star in the first TV film. There was even a version of Majors detested the atmosphere Dusty Springfield created when he sang a theme song, so he fought difficult to make the character feel more genuine and human. No murdering, no blood. Producers eventually listened to the show because it was just a strong man doing what was right. Assumed a somber tone, with Majors helping to mold it into something that spectators could truly engage with. The $6 million man's debut. It wasn't a one-time event. It was a procedure. The first film, which debuted in March 1973, destroyed the due to rivalry in the ratings. The unexpected popularity resulted in the release of 2 further films that year with a flair more reminiscent of James Bond, but by the time it became under new direction, the tone changed once more in 1974 when it expanded into a full weekly series. Major's viewpoint was emphasized in the program. It was less glamorous and more gritty. He played Steve Austin as someone who didn't enjoy bloodshed or espionage but did what he had to do as a reluctant hero. The audience adored it, but what really intensified the situation was that at the same time when he was the star of the $6 million man, Majors, for a spell, he was simultaneously the star of 2 network shows while still performing as Owen Marshall. ABC didn't want to let him go from the courtroom drama, which was nearly unprecedented. However, they also didn't want the Bionic Man plot to stall, therefore they devised an insane timetable in which Major filmed scenes for both series, frequently running between soundstages on the same day. Like a man with a true bionic legs, he even spent some time living on the studio lot in order to continue doing double duty. Wasn't permanent. Later, David Soul took his position on Owen Marshall, but the encounter left. Majors were exhausted, but it demonstrated how much the network trusted him, and he demonstrated their correctness, and the risk, strain, and countless hours all contributed to Lee's transformation. Major became well known behind the scenes, but Lee Major wasn't content. In 1975, after serving as the franchise's spokesperson, he made the decision to do something else. As the director, he chose a scene that combined espionage with football, and even invited actual NFL players, such as Dick Butkus and Larry Sanka, to appear as guest stars. The action in the wild episode was filmed on uneven, overgrown fields. Reviews were varied, with some praising it as one of the best despite its chaotic and gritty appearance. Majors demonstrated that he could manage more than just the strangest episodes. When acting arrived in 1977, the program was still well liked, but everyone assumed that Majors' refusal to be on set was motivated by money, but it wasn't. He wanted his production firm to be named after his ex-wife, Farrah Fawcett, since he was striving for something greater. Universal took issue with that and filed a lawsuit against him. Shocked the business. Major ultimately received what he desired, but the altercation might have caused the show's ratings to decline, and the end seemed near. What occurred next? Changed the course of television history. Lee Major was sick of action sequences with just men in them. Questioned the producers about the lack of a romance plot for his character. Lindsay Wagner's portrayal of Amy Summers was created as a result of the inquiry. After only 2 episodes, she was supposed to die, but because viewers adored her, they couldn't let her go, so the authors devised a plot twist in which she was just recovering from that twist led to the creation of the Bionic Woman, and, surprisingly, her program even made history by defeating the $6 Million Man in ratings. No sci-fi performer had ever won an Emmy, but there was a catch to success. Although they appeared to be a power couple on film, Majors and Wagner hardly discussed why they paid Wagner. Made significantly less money than Majors, despite having her own successful show. Claimed later that the difference was significant, at about $60,000. At the time, she had little influence to oppose it, and the two shows' separation was finalized when the Bionic Woman transferred to a different network. Were only years after both shows that there were no more crossovers or collaborations had concluded. Did Major and Wagner begin to reunite? Lee Major was Farrah Fawcett had recently arrived in Hollywood, and was already a big celebrity when he saw her photo in his agent's office. Youthful, attractive, and unknown without even having met her. Major he boldly left a note at the girl's boarding home, where she was staying, stating that he would pick her up at 8. Farrah. She acknowledged that their first date was unpleasant, even though she felt he was nasty. Any remarks said, and Farrah became ill after drinking, but Lee dispatched they didn't simply fall in love. Her 13 yellow roses transformed everything. By the middle of the 1970s, they were the pair that everyone was talking about. Farrah had exploded into the world, and the $6 Million Man's face was Lee. Famed with Charlie's Angels, her image appeared on posters all over the place. Globally, this hairdo was imitated, yet beneath the glitz, there drew them in separate directions while they were already developing their professions, and despite their prominence, they hardly ever saw one another, and never had time to begin. When a family moved in 1979, everything fell apart, and he requested his longtime friend Ryan O'Neal to check in on Farrah while he was filming in Canada. Everything changed with that one request. Ryan and Farrah became too close. Began as a mutually beneficial favor and evolved into a love tale without Lee. When he realized he was broken, he went up to Ryan and pleaded with him to stop. However, Ryan didn't say, "I really love her." And then suddenly, in an attempt to salvage their friendship, Lee called Ryan's house. When he eventually got through, he told Ryan to stay after hanging up and calling again. Farrah had already infiltrated Ryan's life and left, but it was too late. Despite the disintegration of their marriage, Lee and Farrah continued to speak daily. There was heartache over the phone, but there was also an odd sense of loyalty that never completely passed away when they were apart. Lee was depleted by the attention and the quiet at home as he put in grueling hours to maintain his job. Lee later acknowledged that they were afloat, while Farrah was away seeking new employment and a new relationship. Only spent 2 weeks together in a single year, but it wasn't just an affair. The timing, pressure, and distance were what ended their marriage, but despite all the pain, there was something softer behind it. Divorce. The judge was prepared to divide everything after they quarreled over their enormous home. Choose who would receive it, but Lee quietly decided to give it to her. No fight. Gave it out without any conditions. She's a kind woman, and I adore her. Stated outside the eatery where they ate supper that evening, and the resentment that lingered in his mind wasn't love. Lee Major lived the part, and wasn't simply another tough guy on TV. He was more than simply a stuntman when he played Colt Severs in The Fall Guy. He was one. Even Lee wasn't finished testing his abilities. Even if he had already established himself as Steve Austin in The $6 Million Man, he performed the most of his own stunts, which involved jumping off, because he desired realism. Automobiles colliding on rooftops and being flung about like a rag doll, yet the years would not allow those injuries to go unnoticed, and by the time he reached his 60s, his knees were in. His doctor had to remove fluid from them every week due to their ongoing suffering. And,